Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Breaking Bread, the show where we discuss the latest and hottest topics in the NRL. It is Isaac here today, and doing a solo episode today. Les is out crook this week, so it will just be myself, but I'm super keen to kind of get into all the interesting topics that we've got going through sport and NRL in the last week. As you guys know, a lot of the stories, or all the stories that we go through, are the stories that I break and publish through Zero Tackle. So if you ever want to get the full scoop, feel free to head over to zerotackle.com.au, or you can head over to my Instagram, which is IsaacIsa_journalist, and you can get the full scoop there as well. But I'm super keen to kind of get into it this week. And as we obviously won't have our usual host, so it may be a little bit different, but I'm super keen to kind of give you guys my thoughts on the latest trending topics in the NRL. And we got quite a few stories that I want to get through today. So we got some stories touching on the latest news around State of Origin, as well as a bit of news around the latest expansion clubs coming into the NRL in the next few years, and some controversial quotes that we've gotten from a few NRL legends and a few players who are moving clubs in the next couple seasons. So plenty to get through today. But as you guys know, my favorite thing to talk about is Origin, and more notably the New South Wales Blues. And we've had some interesting news that's come out in the last few days that I really want to touch on around the vacant wing spot for the New South Wales Blues. So as you guys know, the incumbent winger for the New South Wales Blues, Zach Lomax, has been injured for the past few weeks. But in the latest developments coming out of Parramatta Eels training, Lomax returned to training last week for the Eels. So throughout his session, it was reported the 25-year-old was doing a lot of band work as he warmed back into his training, before doing a little bit of testing on his right foot with a few kicks as well, which is obviously a huge talking point around his game for the Parramatta Eels, as he is their goal kicker, and he could potentially be the goal kicker for the New South Wales Blues if he were to be selected. So with this news of the Eels centre making his way back into training, it has raised a few question marks around the potential debut around Jacob Kiraz, Bulldogs superstar outside back, who probably had the best game of his NRL career last night, or on Sunday night for the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, and we'll get a little bit more into that later. But so Zach Lomax, he got back into his training last week. He also did a few running drills, and also got under the high ball a few times, just practicing his game and testing out that foot that's been injured. And so his return is looking to come a little bit earlier than expected. A lot of people expected him to be out of Origin contention for Game 1, but he will be making his return hopefully by round 11, if reports are to be believed. And that has essentially skyrocketed his Origin prospects and has put him firmly in the driver's seat for that left wing spot for the New South Wales Blues, obviously with Brian To'o taking the right. Or essentially he could be taking the left side as well, I'm not too sure. But we will see Zach Lomax back into the Origin side, most likely. But the only spanner in the works is, like I said, Jacob Kiraz. And so when I published this story last week, the biggest talking point was that Jacob Kiraz would be missing out on his potential Origin debut with Zach Lomax entering into the side, most likely. But Jacob Kiraz had essentially the best game of his young career on Sunday afternoon against the Titans in Magic Round, which has essentially made this, it's blown this wide open and has made Laurie Daly's decision for who should be the other winger for the New South Wales Blues a lot harder than I think most expected it to be. Now, the Lebanon international had some pretty outrageous stats, and for those of you who had him in your Supercoach or NRL fantasy sides would know that he had just an insane game on Sunday. And I just wanted to go through his stats and just highlight just how incredible he was for those of you who didn't watch the game. So, Jacob Kiraz's stats on Sunday against the Titans: 221 run meters, 3 tries, a try assist, 2 line breaks, 2 line break assists, 14 tackle breaks, and 4 offloads. He had a monster game against the Titans, and it's really blown this wide open and has made Laurie Daly's decision as to who should be the winger for the Blues 10,000 times harder. Now, we all know that Kiraz has been a solid player for the Bulldogs over the last 18 to 24 months, and he obviously has done a serviceable job for the Lebanon international side as well, playing fullback over there. But he was injured for the first few weeks of the season, and as hopeful as a lot of Blues and Bulldogs fans were for Jacob Kiraz to make his Origin debut this year, I feel like a lot of people couldn't look past Zach Lomax and how brilliant he has been. Now, Lomax has been essentially the Eels' best player since joining at the beginning of the year. But he has been out for a few weeks, and in that time, Jacob Kiraz has just made an amazing case for himself. And you can tell that, you know, the connection that he has with Stephen Crichton over on that right side for the Bulldogs, it's something that, you know, it's almost Panthers-like, and it's similar to the combinations that, you know, that he had with his Panthers teammates, and why he got selected in the Blue side all these years, Stephen Crichton. And now he's got this formidable combination with Jacob Kiraz, and it's blown this wide open and made this such an interesting talking point for the New South Wales Blues, because while picking on talent is obviously the most important and most notable factor of the selection criteria for Origin, you've also got to bring chemistry into account, and it's the reason why I last week said that I think the Blues combination in the half should be a Jerome Luai and Nathan Cleary as opposed to a Mitchell Moses and Nathan Cleary. I feel like if you're trying to outthink the room and you're trying to get all these great players in, I feel like that's going to come to the detriment of the Blues' success in the 2025 series. While Zach Lomax has been insane over the last 12 to 18 months, I do think that if you are wanting to build a side that is going to win for the next 5 years and mirror the likes of Queensland's success over the last 20 years, you need to pick guys that are comfortable playing alongside each other. And we all know that Jacob Kiraz and Stephen Crichton feel very, very comfortable with each other. You'll have a look at one of the plays in Sunday's game against the Titans. You could just tell that I think it was on the way to Kiraz's second or third try. You could just see Crichton was faking the dummy to his left side, and at the last second flipped it over to his right side, and he just knew that Kiraz was there. And Kiraz touched on it in his post-game interview, saying that Crichton came up to him. He said, "I knew you were there. I knew you were there. Don't stress." And it just goes to show the chemistry that the Canterbury skipper has with his right side wing specialist in Jacob Kiraz. And if I'm Laurie Daly, I'm looking at that and I'm licking my lips and I'm thinking, you know what, that is a connection I need to have on my right side. If you can have the best defensive best center in the game, and have his essentially his Robin on that right edge for the New South Wales Blues, I don't think it's something you can look past. And as amazing as Lomax has been, and while I'm not essentially ruling Lomax out completely, I do think that this game over the last weekend has really pushed his Kiraz's prospects ahead of Lomax's. Now, we will see Lomax return in round 11, so it is up to Kiraz to see how he kind of continues this hot streak as he moves forward into the areas of selection for Laurie Daly. But I definitely think it's blown wide open for the Lebanon International, and I'm really excited to see how this competition between the two wingers does kind of pan out. But one thing for sure, as a Blues fan, we are in an amazing position either way. You either have a hot up-and-coming, outside back who is just frothing to just succeed on every level in a Jacob Kiraz, or you've got, essentially the best outside back, if not a top 3 outside back in the game, in Zach Lomax, who is just, waiting to get back into that sky blue jumper. So as a Blues fan, we're in a good position either way, and I'm super keen to kind of see where we go from here. Now, the next story that I've got for us today And it's a shame because I'm really keen to kind of hear LEZ'S thoughts on this topic, and obviously he's not in today. But this is a really interesting topic, and I really want to get into it because it is interesting for those who are looking forward to an expansion side in the NRL, but also for Rabbitohs fans. And I've spoken to a lot of Rabbitohs fans around this kind of topic, and it seems a lot of them are against it, but I am keen to kind of get into it and give my thoughts. So an NRL legend, Sam Burgess, is in line to coach the next expansion club in the NRL. So Sam Burgess is hoping to return to Australia, and while many would have expected that he would be looking to return to the Rabbitohs, he is looking to return with one of the NRL's newest clubs. So according to AAP, the premiership winning Englishman has high-profile individuals pushing his case behind the scenes to be the head coach of the next NRL expansion side. So whether that be the new Perth side or the new PNG side coming in the next few seasons. And he's been receiving plenty of recommendations for the two vacant coaching positions. So as many would know, Burgess was the assistant coach for the South Sydney Rabbitohs up until 2023 when he abruptly quit his role due to some conflict behind the scenes. And he made his way over to the Super League to become the head coach of the Warrington Wolves. Now, his current deal with the Wolves is set to expire at the end of 2026, which would be the end of next season, which would set him up very nicely to, work into Perth's kind of time frame for when they would need their head coach, as Perth is looking to enter the NRL in 2027, or he could be a part of PNG's inauguration into the NRL in 2028. So either way, I think it sets him up really nicely to join either side in the inauguration into the NRL. Now, while former Parramatta Eels coach Brad Arthur has been touted as the most likely man for the job in Western Australia, it has been reported that his candidacy is yet to be formally discussed by the ARL Commission. So essentially what that means is, while many have pegged Brad Arthur to become the next coach of the Perth side, it hasn't been discussed formally behind the scenes, and that's a really huge talking point because obviously there are a lot of, factors in motion behind the scenes to get the Perth side into the NRL in the next year and a half. And it's not a very long time frame. So the fact that Brad Arthur hasn't kind of been identified as the man of the job straight away, it's really important to note because Perth is going to want to get their leading man into the side, hopefully in the next couple months, because they really don't have a lot of time before they're entering the competition. And as we kind of saw with the Dolphins a couple years ago, you do need at least a year or so to get a club up and running. And to get the Bears back into the competition by 2027, it's a huge task. And that's why it's really important that they kind of get their head coach in straight away. So with Sam Burgess kind of putting his hand up to be the next coach, I think it's super exciting for Bears fans or PNG fans either way to have an NRL legend of his stature and his experience wanting to be a part of that process. Now, I know that with, the most recent expansion club, as I said, the Dolphins, they had Wayne Bennett, essentially the greatest coach of all time, if not top 2 or 3, leading the charge over there in Redcliffe. And even they, didn't start off with, they still haven't made the NRL finals, which is completely understandable. But if you've got a guy like Wayne Bennett leading your expansion side and you're not hitting it off the mark, it just speaks to what a tall order it is for an expansion side to be successful in the NRL. Now, speaking of Wayne Bennett, and the reason I kind of touch on this is because he was asked about the situation as well around Sam Burgess and his potential employment as the next expansion head coach, whether that's PNG or Perth. And he's obviously got a really close relationship with Sam Burgess, which is why I thought it was super interesting to kind of get his thoughts on it he was obviously the most recent inaugural coach of an expansion side. So speaking to AAP, Wayne Bennett said that Sam Burgess, of course, has a coaching future in the NRL, but he wouldn't want to see him go to a startup club, which was super interesting. He said, I'm sure Sam will come back to the NRL one day. Where he will come back, I don't know, and he doesn't know at this stage of his career. Sam is a great person, full stop. Now, he was super adamant that he wouldn't recommend the Englishman to coach a startup franchise, saying how difficult the process is. And while it feels like an exciting prospect for a lot of aspiring head coaches, it's not all glitz and glamour. So I'll continue kind of discussing the quotes that he touched on. He highlighted how difficult the process really is, and he was warning off inquisitive coaches considering the idea. So he said, if you look at the franchise clubs, you'll see how many have made it. It sounds like a lot of fun, but it can be a journey to nowhere. It's an extremely tough gig, and it's not something I would recommend for anyone to take up. It's crazy to hear Wayne Bennett speak like this, because it really puts a dampener on the potential of a couple expansion clubs, and to have a man of his stature say how difficult it was for him and how difficult it can be for any coach. If I'm Sam Burgess, I'm kind of pulling back a little bit to hear Bennett kind of speak on it this way. Now, while I'm super excited for for a couple of new expansion clubs to enter the league, I do also think that there's a lack of coaching talent in the league as is. You're seeing coaches get sacked left, right, and center, and coaches are struggling all over the place. And when you've got guys like Sam Burgess, Trent Barrett, Brad Arthur, those are your highest quality coaches on the market at the moment. No disrespect to those guys, but it's not the levels of a Ivan Cleary, of a Wayne Bennett, of a Craig Bellamy, even to a lesser degree a Cameron Ciraldo or an Andrew Webster. Like you've got these coaches who, yes, they've got experience, but they don't have the success that these guys have, and so it's really worrying for the NRL, who's wanting to obviously expand the NRL. Because you don't want to bring in 2 new clubs and just have them be bottom feeders. And you're seeing that with the Dolphins now. Like, while obviously they started to, kind of improve over the last month, they've struggled since Wayne Bennett has left, and they weren't, overly impressive with Wayne Bennett as well. So I know there's been a lot of talk around, the talent pool in the NRL. I personally think that we do have enough talent for 2 new expansion sides. You've got, young guys like a Bailey Hayward, a Jai Gray, a Tyron Wishart, who are essentially, just waiting for their opportunity to become stars in the NRL. I don't think it's an issue of talent on field. I think it's an issue of talent in the coaching box. And so while I do want to see Sam Burgess make his way back into the NRL in some capacity, I would much prefer to see him come in as an assistant coach at the South Sydney Rabbitohs once again, so Wayne Bennett can put in a plan for Burgess to become the head coach once he decides to move on, which I believe is expected in 2028. So definitely an interesting talking point for the NRL and the 2 new expansion sides, and I'm super keen to kind of see where things go. But yeah, look, me personally, I don't love the idea of having Sam Burgess come in and be Perth or PNG's coach. But again, I don't know who is, the best kind of option. Obviously, Brad Arthur is a brilliant coach, but even he's been discarded in the NRL. So you've got all these kind of throwaway coaches, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but you've got these coaches who haven't been good enough to coach NRL sides so far, and it worries me as to how they'll go as coaches for the expansion side. So definitely one to keep an eye on. I expect that we'll hear something soon from probably the Perth side soon around who the next coach or who their first coach will be. But with Burgess putting his hand up, I'm sure that is an exciting prospect for Bears fans because obviously he does have a high stature, and I do think he will be able to attract players over there. both international and national players. But again, I guess we'll just kind of see. Now, our next story that we have today. NRL legend critiques Lachlan Ilias following his axing. So, huge talking points for the Dragons this last week. 24-year-old Lachlan Ilias was the Dragons' starting halfback for the opening 2 months of the 2025 NRL season, but was axed this past week by head coach Shane Flanagan. Penrith Panthers legend Greg Alexander has shared his thoughts on the Ilias saga, highlighting a few concerning factors in the young halfbacks game. So, Alexander came out and he said, what has let Lachlan Ilias down has been game management. Getting the Dragons the win when they've been in positions to win has been his biggest struggle, Alexander said on SEN's 1170 breakfast. So Ilias has really struggled as the starting halfback for the Dragons in the opening couple months. It's and I went over these facts when I wrote the story for Zero Tackle last week. If you want the full scoop, head over to zerotackle.com. But when writing these stats, Ilias as the starting halfback for the Dragons ranks last amongst the Dragons playmakers for try assists and line break assists, with just 2 and 1 respectively. That is atrocious for a starting halfback in the NRL. I'm just going to say it. It's abysmal for a starting halfback to be last in try assists and line break assists in his sides, choice of playmakers. Now, obviously, you've got guys like a Clint Gutherson who is, notorious for setting his teammates up for success. But as a starting halfback, you've got that 7 on your back. You automatically gain the respect of the players around you to have your hands on the ball essentially throughout the whole match. And for him to, you'd be ranking up such, he's got 2 try assists in 8 rounds, 7 or 8 rounds, which is, it's atrocious. So Brandy went on to offer Ilias his 2 cents. And he essentially said, while you are in the New South Wales Cup, I want you to focus on running the ball, which, Brandy believes is Ilias's bread and butter. Saying that he needs to focus on running the ball and essentially get out of his own head. Now, Flanagan was really big, as in Shane Flanagan, the coach, was really big on the fact that Ilias needs to kind of regain his confidence, and that's why he sent him down to New South Wales Cup. And I kind of wanted to touch on the New South Wales Cup game that he was a part of over the weekend, because while many would have had their eyes on the Dragons' very disappointing loss to the Tigers over the weekend, their New South Wales Cup side didn't suffer the same kind of tragedy that they did. Now, for those of you who don't know, the game that Ilias was a part of over the weekend, the St. George New South Wales Cup side took on the West Tigers New South Wales Cup side, and they won 60-26. 60 points to 26 points. They absolutely flogged them, and Ilias played an amazing game. Now, you would have remembered I just said that Ilias has had 2 try assists and 1 line break assist in the entire season for the Dragons, first grade squad. I'm going to go through his stats in the New South Wales Cup match, and he had 2 tries, 1 try assist and 2 line break assists. He's already doubled his line break assist total in the season in 1 game in New South Wales Cup. So he scored 8 points. He had a 94% tackle success, getting 15 out of 16 tackles to connect. He ran 102 run meters in 20 runs. And he kicked a total of 56 kick meters. So obviously his kicks weren't crazy or anything like that, but his running game, essentially exactly what Brandy kind of touched on as his biggest talking point around Ilias's game. He nailed it, and it secured him 2 tries. And while I do think that Ilias has a lot of work to do on his game moving forward, the Greece international, it shows that he's got so much talent in his game. And you'll remember, I think it was last year or the year before, when Jason Demetrio, obviously not the coach of the Rabbitohs anymore, but he said that Ilias would be the greatest halfback in South Sydney Rabbitohs history. Now, first of all, absolutely awful call, and probably the worst thing I've ever heard any coach say about a player. But yeah, it came from a place of, of knowing the talent that Ilias has. And obviously, while he's not going to be an all-time great, at least, it doesn't look like it right now, he can't be an extremely talented halfback in the NRL. And that's why I think that Ilias should kind of, work on his game in New South Wales Cup and regain that confidence, because he definitely does have it in him. And I guess we'll kind of see where things go for the Greece International. But I'm really excited to kind of see if he can make his way into the the NRL first grade squad for the Dragons. Now, obviously, they debuted King Tonga over the weekend at that halfback spot, and I thought he was brilliant, and I really liked his game, and I really liked watching him. And if I'm, sharing my 2 cents, I actually do prefer King Tonga as the halfback. But I guess we're going to have to kind of see how he goes over the next few weeks. But if Ilias can keep producing performances like this in New South Wales Cup, I think he'll be banging down the door to reclaim that Dragons jersey in the near future. Cool. On to our final story for today. And I thought when I broke this story, when I spoke about this story last week, I thought it was an interesting talking point, but I think it's just such a huge story now following the Raiders win on Sunday night over the Melbourne Storm. But Jamal Fogarty broke his silence last week for the first time over the Raiders' exit at the end of this season. So for those of you who don't know, Fogarty will be joining the Manly Sea Eagles, essentially being DCE's replacement from 2026 for 3 seasons. But Fogarty kind of came out and he basically said that his exit from the Raiders has less to do with Manly and more to do with Canberra. And he kind of went on, and his quotes were a little bit icy, and I kind of wanted to break them down a little bit. So he came out and he spoke to the Daily Telegraph saying, I always wanted to stay, and the club knew I wanted to stay. My agent rang the club 3 times during the preseason to activate the 1-year deal. Unfortunately, they knocked it back and wanted to renegotiate. In the end, the Raiders just didn't budge on their offer, which was well below my current deal. The club made a business decision, and so did I. To hear how the Raiders have kind of handled this situation, it's not a knock on them, because they obviously have faith in their young halves coming through. They've obviously got Ethan Strange at 6, and they've got Ethan Sanders at 7, planning to kind of claim that 7 jersey for the long term. So I do understand why the Raiders haven't decided to steer away from Fogarty, paying him, more than they were kind of willing to. But Fogarty is one of the best 7s in the game, and you've got a side that is currently sitting 2nd on the ladder. The Raiders are 2nd on the NRL ladder, and he is, if not the biggest reason why, he's, one of the biggest reasons why you guys are doing so well. And while I understand the want to kind of, focus on your young guys and stay well below the salary cap, you're not in a position to rebuild. You're in a position to contend. You've got one of the best front rowers in the game in Joe Tarpanay, your captain. You've got one of the best middles in the game in Corey Horsburgh. You've got an elite, back line, and you've got one of the best 7s in the game. You've got the opportunity to compete with the likes of the Broncos, of the Storm, of the Bulldogs, of the Panthers. You have, you're sitting 2nd. And while I understand that you want to look towards the future, Canberra does not attract many stars. No one wants to go to Canberra. It's freezing cold, and the club has not had that much success over the last little while. And so, if I'm Ricky Stewart, I'm holding on to Fogarty. He's 31 years old. He's in the prime years of his career as a starting halfback in the NRL. And I'm locking in this core and seeing what we can do over the next 2 to 3 years. For the first time, the NRL is wide open. The Panthers are nowhere near the level of dominance that we've seen in the last half decade. The Bulldogs are essentially the most dominant side in the comp, and we even saw that they're not invincible last week in their loss against the Broncos. If I'm the Raiders, I'm keeping this core together. Now, Fogarty's a new deal will have him earning around $700,000 a season, which was a figure that the Raiders were not willing to come even close to, which is absolutely a slap in the face to Fogarty. He is absolutely worth the $700,000. I do not think Manly have paid overs for him at all. And if I'm being honest, while DCE is a legend of the game, if I am the Sea Eagles, I'm honestly looking at this as a win. You've got a guy who's 3 years younger, who's producing, while not at the same level as the DCE, he's definitely producing around, maybe a par below, and he'd be essentially earning, $300,000 less than a DCE per season. I feel like the Raiders have severely underrated the services of a Jamal Fogarty, and I don't think the Raiders win a premiership this year, but I do think they can in the next 2 to 3 years. With Fogarty at the helm, and if you've got Ethan Sanders at your starting 7, you're wasting the prime of a Joe Tarpanay, you're wasting the prime of a Corey Horsburgh. I'm just trying to think. You've got a Hudson Young there as well, who I haven't even spoken about, who's probably been their best player, and you're wasting the prime of him as well. No NRL club wins a premiership without an elite halfback. Canterbury are number 1 in the comp, and they wouldn't be if Toby Sexton hadn't taken the leap that he had this season. I guess when I first published this story, I was of the belief that Canberra were making the right decision because they've got Ethan Sanders. But after watching their performance against the Storm on Sunday night, it just reminded me that Fogarty is an elite halfback in this competition, and Titans were silly for letting him go. And it was a steal for the Raiders when they brought him in. And it confuses me why they have decided to steer away from him. If you could have had him for 2 more years and popped him on 700, even a 650 to have him stay, because he did want to stay, develop Ethan Sanders a little bit more, maybe even chuck him into a 14 role. I think it would have paid dividends, and I think it could have resulted in a premiership, if I'm being honest. Am I overrating the Raiders? Am I underrating what Ethan Sanders can do? Let me know. But that's kind of just where I'm at on the whole situation. But I guess we'll see how the Raiders go over the next 3 or 4 months. If they kind of fall off a cliff, then this decision will look like a masterstroke from Ricky Stewart and the Raiders. But as it kind of stands right now, as they kind of sit second on the NRL ladder, I personally think it is a mistake letting him go. But I guess we'll see over the next few months. I think that's it from me today. I'm not used to talking so much on the potty. I normally have Les to kind of fill the empty spaces for me, but it was super awesome kind of taking charge of the episode of Breaking Bread this week, and it'll be the 2 of us back again next week. Like I said earlier, all the stories that we speak about on Breaking Bread, they are my stories that I publish over at Zero Tackle. I am an article writer and a journalist over at Zero Tackle. I also do work at ABC, for those of you who don't know. If you are keen on, getting the latest on the stories that we speak about here, head over to my Instagram. It's IsaacIsa_journalist, and I discuss all the stories there. But other than that, I hope you all have an awesome week, and we'll see you next week with me and Les at the helm.